Welcome to the Vault Podcast, classic music reviews, presented by IV Creative. Now, here's your hosts, B. Cox and the crew.
Greetings, and welcome, everybody. You are now inside the Vault. And here, of course, with yours truly, B. Cox. And, of course, we have the crew. Seated, of course, to my left, we got my man, Damo, joining us today. And to my right, we got DET Dave. Of course, Dave, you can hear him, of course, on 2-in-1 and also the former host of the Renaissance Forum podcast as well. Glad to have both of my partners here with me to discuss the Vault.
Yes, sir.
And, of course, the premise of this show, we like to take you back, all the way back in time. What we do is review classic music and classic albums from 20, 25, and 30 years back. And so if you're doing your math, that will leave you with reviews from the year and albums that came out in the years of 1999, 1994, and 1989 for this year. So you're going to be looking forward to some good classic album reviews and music reviews coming out from those years. And we got a lot of material to cover for the years of 99, 94, and 89. And today, of course, we're going to be taking you back to 1999, 20 years ago. This first one that we have. First of all, I'm going to stop right now just to ask my co-host, my two gentlemen right here, how y'all doing today, man? We're here on a very splendid Sunday afternoon recording.
It's a beautiful day.
Yes, sir.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, so we're going to get right into it. And so the Vault, of course, presented by IV Creative. You can follow us on Facebook on IV Creative and also on Instagram, IVECRE8. And we'll have lots more of material to come as we continue on this journey. So the Vault, the very first album that we are reviewing today, of course, we're going to take you all the way back to the year of 1999. And it's ironic that we're doing this right now here, that we are just a day removed from the 20th anniversary of this classic album. And of course, the album that I'm referring to is Murda Muzik by Mobb Deep. Is their fourth studio album. Was released on August 17th, 1999. So almost exactly 20 years ago, guys. We're talking about this. So
a long time ago.
20 years ago. This, of course, released on August 17th, 1999. Their fourth album, of course, you know, the famed duo from Queensbridge, Mobb Deep, Havoc, and, of course, the late, great Prodigy, passed away now almost 2 years, more than 2 years now, since he's been gone. But this was their fourth studio album. And, you know, everybody knows Mobb's, you know, what their themes were, what they did. It's gangster music, hardcore music. That's what they did. To me, I think they sort of took a bit of a transition, and we'll go into that as we head a little bit further on into the review. Just to let you know, of course, it was a runtime of this album was just, you know, this is when you used to have, you know, long albums. I mean, this is well over a certain amount of time, well over 70 minutes. And this had 19 actual tracks. And just to recap a few of the executive producers, of course, Mobb Deep executive producers, both Havoc and also Prodigy executive, Jonathan Likely Williams, Baby Chris, Buddha, and of course, the Alchemist. Going into the producer list here, this is the first album that Mobb Deep had since their debut of Juvenile Hell in 1993 that was not exclusively produced by Havoc. So you're looking at Alchemist giving a couple of offerings on this, and also Buddha, Epitome, Shamello, Jonathan Williams, also T-Mix as well, giving some offerings. This is the thing that I like about that, because I think, you know, when you get into a point where you have one producer working on an album, we see this happen with A Tribe Called Quest as well, where you exclusively had Q-Tip and then also Ali Shaheed Muhammad also always producing these albums, and they got away from that on their fourth album, which was Beats, Rhymes, and Life, where the Ummah produced exclusively almost everything on the album, including in JD, which I think was a good change up. A lot of Tribe fans didn't like it, just like a lot of Mobb fans didn't like the fact that Havoc didn't produce everything on this album. So this is what we have. I mean, of course, you know, you're the executive producers, and of course, you told the individual producers that have been on, and of course, Havoc did the lion's share producing. And another thing about this, what we also noticed in doing our research about this, we understood this album was heavily bootlegged. You know,
it's about what, 6 songs?
Yeah,
and at least 6 songs. I read that Big Noy was supposed to be on it.
Yeah,
They had a remix. Was it the track USA? Nas was supposed to have an extra verse on that.
Yeah. Now there were
Columbia wasn't trying to clear him for 2 tracks.
Yeah, which is crazy, and that's another thing you talk about the business of the record industry is the fact that there's a rapper who was already cleared to have been on 1 track. You know, he was featured on the second to last track on this album, which was It's Mine, and he couldn't get cleared to be on another track, which is really crazy. The fact that they did that. So quite a few were actually. They recorded at least 5 new tracks on this album that Spread Love, I'm Going Out, Can't, Buck With, It's Mine, Quiet Storm, the remix, all were included. And a couple of tracks were all pulled off as a result of the bootleg. And same thing that happened with this, same thing would happen with I Am. And it's unfortunate because it would have been, now you can go back and all these tracks are available. Most of them are available online. You can go back and listen to it. Just like we saw that with I Am, those tracks were taken off and then it became a part of what we now known as the first lost tapes of Nas. And
classic.
It just goes to sit there and say, like, man, if this would have been on the original I Am, then Nas could actually have some claims of having many more, another classic, bona fide classic in his catalog, but nonetheless. So, talking about this, of course, August 1999, where we all were when this album first came out. Dave, I'm going to start with you. August 17, 1999, this album first comes out. Where were you when this album came out and your first reaction to it when it came out as well?
I'm going to be honest with you. I just listened to this album for the first time.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, dead serious. This is the first time I listened to Murda Muzik. And I'm kind of half on it. I guess we'll get into that a little later. We break down each thing, but I think 99, what the hell was I doing? I might have been cutting grass with my uncle. But I mean, I was, I wasn't really into, the stuff that wasn't on the radio. I was listening to a whole bunch of stuff that was on the radio back then, but, I didn't really listen to Murda Muzik or any Mobb Deep or anything like that, Of course, I listened to Nas and people like that, but I wasn't really exposed to Mobb Deep like that, though.
Yeah. Well, Damo, and where you were when this album first came out, your first reaction to it when you listened to it.
Well, I was a big Mobb Deep fan, so I was excited when it came out. Now the youngest don't know about running to the record store to get an album. I ran to the record store, and it was Tuesday. It's not like Friday now.
Yeah.
Tuesday I ran to the record. It's like, I gotta have this.
Yeah. Can we talk about that? Like how albums used to come out,
yes.
And you used to wait for that Tuesday was album release Tuesday, and you would sit there and look at the schedule and what was coming out. And now it's so different now because albums come out, you don't know what day.
We also was preview to months before coming out when he had the magazines giving
the Source magazine coming out, 5
coming
mics.
out telling you, you was like, I can't wait till this come out.
Yeah.
So everything I was reading on the source, I was like, I gotta go get this.
Right.
So I ran and got it. I was working at the glass shop. I took my little money, ran down there, got that, and I think I bumped there for at least a couple of weeks straight. I was going from that and Nas and that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was at the same place where both of you all were going into my senior year of high school. I was a big Mobb Deep fan. Really, where I picked up my fandom from Mobb Deep was started at the infamous, like many of us who first really paid attention. Juvenile, hell, I didn't really even know anything about it until I had become a Mobb Deep fan and started doing my research on the internet. But when I heard it, first of all, the first song that I heard from it wasn't a song that many people think. It wasn't Quiet Storm. It was Illustrious was the first one that I had heard. And this is when, you talk about 98, 99, you get into the internet and start getting onto these message boards. And that's when really I think message boards started making its rounds and making it and inserting its influence when the fans had an open forum outside of just being in your circle of friends, being able to talk about an album on the internet and discuss with people and debate because that was a big thing. Like when I first started getting on Duck Down charts and DVDs, websites, and all hip hop, when these first came around, you used to go to rap reviews. I used to go to rapreviews.com, which was tied to OHHLA, which was the online hip hop lyric archive, which I was a student of having to write music, and you start getting into these, message boards and discussion forums and chats, and people start talking about music. And this is the first time you really saw something on the internet in depth when it really started to grow. So you see now people on Twitter, people on Facebook starting to do like these discussions about these rap albums and these debates, and that's when it all started. And I would jump on, and there were some things that were people that were against it, some negatives, some positive reviews. To me, as a Mobb Deep, I think as a Mobb Deep fan, I wasn't as impressed with it, but initially. But it took some time to grow on me, which I understood, and when some years went along. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But to me, I would have to say this: as far as the themes present on the album, it's a Mobb album. You know what you're going to get, right?
Gritty.
It's gritty, it's gutter. You know, it's New York. I
wrote that down. They said it was gritty then.
Yeah, man. That's how it is. And when you listen to a Mobb Deep album, you know for the most part, pre-2000, what you're gonna get in a Mobb Deep album.
Dirty.
It's gonna be dirty, gritty. A lot of it's gonna be dark, man. And if you listen to the album before this, Hell on Earth, it follows a lot of the same things that you hear on Infamous and Hell on Earth. I think what's a little bit different though is, to me, the production's a little bit different, one, but then I also think, to me personally, I think Havoc kind of stepped it up a little bit. This, as far as his rhymes were concerned.
I think Prodigy did too.
Yeah, I think they both did, and I think they both kind of took a step up a little bit. I
kind of think Havoc stepped back some and let Prodigy have more of the spotlight.
No, absolutely.
That's what I felt like listening to this one. It sounded like he knew he was going to push Prodigy to be more of the single artist than him.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think we know now why that is. I think we know now because the next year, what happens? Prodigy comes out with HNIC. Yep. You know, comes out with his first solo album, and I do get that. I think more so when I say Havoc stepped it up. I think Havoc stepped up one as a sort of like as an executive producer, sort of like shaping the form of the album, but then also, to me, I think quality wise, his lyrics were a little bit better than I knew in some of the other, mobs. I mean, Prodigy is always going to shine, and you always have sort of like someone who's a spotlight when you have a rap duo or rap group. But to me, I think Havoc, his quality of his lyrics stepped up a little bit, and he was willing also, like you said, took a step back to let P shine a little bit more, and then also to be able to give the guests that were on there to shine a little bit more as well. Like we talk about, there are features on this, of course, from Cormega. You got a feature on here from Lil C's. Raekwon, who now this is the third straight Mobb album he was featured on. The other two ones were classics, the Raekwon and Mobb Deep collabos that they did. There was Infamous Mobb, Kool G Rap, of course.
Yes.
And then Nas. So there were a couple of tracks on here where Havoc didn't have a verse, and it was P, And that's kind of tough, when you're part of a rap duo, but then it really kind of takes a team, and to me, Havoc and Prodigy were a true team in that sense. That they were able to, the Havoc kind of took a step back and let the album sort of take its shape with P and then some of the other producers and then also some of the guests as well. So, and to me, I guess I would have to really say this. I guess on this album, to me, I think they really had to, they kind of scaled back a little bit of the grit and the grime, if you could, because they knew they needed a couple of more radio tracks.
Yeah.
I mean, Mobb always did pretty well with their fans. They did well with the New York rap fans, and they did well with the people who love street rap, who love that genre. But they had a couple of songs on here that they actually had some video and radio plays because they had to.
It's Mine got the video.
Yeah.
Quiet Storm, the remix with Lil Kim. That was a big hit for them.
Yeah, exactly.
That was a big hit for them.
And you sort of get to a point, and we'll talk about this with another album that we featured, is that at some point in time, you got to be able to have some success commercially to be viable. I mean, this is 99 we're talking about. Now, you got artists that can release things completely independently and not have to do, not have to sign with a label. As a matter of fact, now signing a label is supposed to be the kiss of death nowadays, As
a matter of fact, wasn't Quiet Storm the remix available on the Into Deep soundtrack?
It is. It was. It is.
Yeah, because that was the first song you heard when you watched that movie. I'm like, that yeah. If anything, that song kind of like really introduced you to that movie. It was dope. Yeah, that was the opening of Into Deep. Yeah, it was, man. Because and that that remix, man, to me, you got to put it when you talk about like the best remixes that you've heard. That to me has to be on the list of the best remixes. Can't murder that.
And everybody.
That's what I'm saying.
But you want to know what?
That's what I'm saying.
It absolutely is. But but if you look at the remix, not just looking at what Kim did. Everybody brought their game on that remix. Havoc did, P did, and definitely Kim did. it's a classic when it goes down to classics of remix and posse tracks. You know, but as far as what we say, the first reaction, so the Things Present, we talked about that.
That's their only platinum selling album.
That's the only platinum selling album that they've had. Yeah. So to me, I'm going to go around now. We're going to talk about the songs, the high points, and then also what you liked. So I'm going to start now, of course, with Damo. We're going to talk about just reviewing a few of the songs and your high points of the album based on what you heard then and even now. What's your highlights as far as the few of the songs that you know are your favorites on that album?
Like you said earlier, Illustrious.
Yeah.
I love Illustrious. Mm-hmm. I love The Realest with Kool G Rap.
Absolutely.
I listened to that joint at least I had to listen to it like 3 times just to hear. I was like, ooh, I don't know how he wasn't on there. They didn't have him on that 50 list that they had a couple of weeks ago. Talking about he not on there. I was like, how you hear this and not put him on that list?
Yeah.
Man, please don't get me started on these lists.
Yeah, we could have a whole nother podcast episode about those lists.
Please
those
don't.
lists with quotation marks around them.
Let a hoe be a hoe.
Oh, yeah. I figured you.
Let a hoe be a hoe. That's probably one of my favorite jokes right there.
Yeah.
Because they definitely give you the game right there, for real.
Indeed. Dave, your highlights on the album as far as, you know, what's your favorite ones based on you listening to this when your first blush. You said this was the first time you listened to the album.
Y'all know me. I'm not really a big mainstream dude.
Mm-hmm.
Listening to Little Cease on I'm Going Out really surprised me that he was able to hang with P and Havoc on that joint.
Okay, yeah.
Of course, I like Where You From with 8 Ball. I thought that was a good collaboration. That was a very good
I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you said that.
The production was very good too.
Yeah.
T-Max, I'm like, who the hell's T-Max? I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
I got to do some research on this cat. And of course, The Realest. And what I found out was that this was actually the Alchemist's first production. I read some notes. I was like, this is his first like appearance on an actual like studio album.
Well, it could be, man, because, you know, Alchemist came along very late and their progression, Mobb Deep's progression, and Alchemist started doing tracks not just for Mobb Deep, but he also started doing tracks for Nas and a few other people. He really sort of stepped in. This is right around the time period he made himself known as a producer. Yeah. And he sort of stepped into that same, you know, footprint of DJ Premier, of Pete Rock, you know, of Dilla's, and using samples and being able to use things like sampling drums, you know, the one things, and then being able to take a very distinct or dubious piano track, you know, or loop, and being able to take it, sample and chop it up and be able to do something with it. I mean, some of the things the Alchemist was able to do, man, he kind of followed in that same tradition, Large Professor, DJ Premier, Pete Rock. Yeah, no, you're right.
That was such a beautifully produced track. And like I said, G Rap came in and just slaughtered it. Oh man, it was a really good, you know, collaboration.
Yeah,
a total collaboration. That was probably my favorite track on the album, The Realest.
Well, for me, I'll actually be quite honest, man. When I first listened to this album, I think I don't know whether it was youth and me being really enthusiastic, because I was really into New York rap a lot back then. I didn't really start getting into, you know, New York rap, some West Coast rap, down South rap if it was Outkast and Goody Mob, yeah, but I wasn't really feeling anyone else like that back then. But after listening to it over the last couple of days, to me, I sort of noticed something. I think the album sort of started a little slow.
Yeah,
I don't know if it was just me, but I think after listening to it 20 years later, I think the album started just a little slow.
I agree.
Like, I think it started slow from track 1 all the way through, even I would have to say 7, 8. And there was some, you know, of course, some highlights there right then and there.
Yeah.
And, you know, to me, I sort of have a philosophy when it comes to listening to albums that, to me, I think the album needs to pick up by track 4. Right. You know? And if it doesn't pick up by track 4 and grab your attention, then it's going to be hard for you to decide to sit there and listen to it all in one listen.
Right.
You know? Because
they gave you a little, like, let a hoe be a hoe. You're like, all right.
Yeah.
And then they fold in you. Little C's on that joint is alright. Illustrious give you a little bang.
Yeah.
But the adrenaline falls off a little bit.
Yeah.
the 8 Ball.
That's when it picks up.
And then they hit you with Quiet Storm right after that.
Yeah.
Where Your Heart At was dope too.
Yeah.
Where Your Heart At was really
Where
dope.
Your Heart At, yeah.
I listened to Where Your Heart At, and it was just like I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm starting to like think about people that people that passed away. I'm like, man, this is tough.
Yeah,
hard to listen to.
And that's where I think you have to when you talk about album selection, right? Like and sequencing. When you're talking about sequencing, like one of the things in another album that we'll actually in a later episode we'll review, which will be Southern Playalistic. When Dee Dee said that when they all sat and listened to the final sequence of the perfectly laid out album, that it was almost like nobody could say a word.
Quiet.
So I think when you do song selection, because when you record these albums, even back then, you're going to record way more tracks. I mean, it even talks about When Things Fall Apart. They recorded over 145 tracks and selected 16 of them. So when you selecting the songs that are going to go on the album and then also sequencing them, and I think to me the reason why I think the album took so long to get started to pick up per se is because it was bootlegged and they had to end up recording new tracks and they had to re-sequence everything. With that being said, if it hadn't been bootlegged, then the original tracks would have been on there. My goodness,
5-star classic.
Yeah, so to me it kind of took a little long for it to get started. But my favorite songs, of course, are The Quiet Storm, of course, that goes without saying. Of course, with Raekwon, Can't Fuck With It. I love, of course, The Realest. And, of course, Where You're From. And to me, not really being a huge down south rap fan, and I knew who 8 Ball and MJG were, but I really wasn't. I don't think that my ears were matured enough to be able to understand the style and what Southern rap for what it was, and not compare them up against, how New York rap was or how West Coast rap was and certain artists, how they were. And to me now, listen to it 20 years later, it's one of my favorite tracks on it now because the beat is so smooth,
Yeah, it's to me, I wrote this down, said, it reminded me of one of them tracks you just put the top down and just cruise through the city.
Exactly.
It's a beautiful track. Beautiful track.
And with Mobb Deep, you don't have a whole lot of tracks like that.
Right.
You don't. And I had an argument with somebody when I was an undergrad, and they were telling me that, if you were putting on a Mobb Deep track, it was only going to do one of a couple of things. You either getting ready to go fight somebody or go kill somebody.
Sounds about right.
And I think they sort of got away from this album, because you had still the gritty and grind, but they had a few other tracks that you could sort of put an album out or put a video out, So I guess if I had to say now, the one thing we sort of talk about our favorite songs, has your favorite song on this album changed then versus now? I guess I'll ask Damo. Has that changed? What your favorite song is now versus then? Or then versus now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It has. So what was it then and what is it now?
It's Mine was then.
Okay.
I don't know if life got me where Let a Hoe Be a Hoe got me. Life took me to where Let a Hoe Be a Hoe.
Yeah.
But that's the joke in me.
Yeah.
But nah, I think The Realest turned into being my favorite one.
Yeah.
And it wasn't then. I don't think I appreciated The Realest then like I do now.
It just kind of, to me, I think it speaks to, one, the fact that The Realest is a track, that was the second track produced by Alchemist on this album. One, people could realize how good of a producer he was going to be and how big he was going to be. And then also, I think a lot of people speak on here realistically, and I think the wider mainstream audience, when I say this, I think a lot of people sleep on how good Kool G Rap was and is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of people.
I mean, for me, when it comes to my lyrical Mount Rushmore, he's right on there, along with Big Daddy Kane, Rakim. I mean, he is.
You can't say those names. People are like, who the hell is Rakim?
Yeah. So
who's Big Daddy Kane?
I mean, and if you listen to historically, man, and he has an album that will also, in 1989, he put out with DJ Polo that we'll review later on this year. But to me, I don't think they really underrate just how great he was, man, and how great he is. So there's a lot of rappers in the game that will give respect to Kool G Rap for what he did and his influence on the game. How many rappers he influenced? Everybody from Biggie to Method Man to Nas. So. No, I definitely understand that. And as far as me, I mean, I would have to say, to me, it's my favorite track now, man, will probably have to be Between the Realest and Where You're From. just because of the mood that I'm normally in when I'm listening to music nowadays. I like to be able to that nostalgia. That's what that track gives me. Those 2 tracks really give me that nostalgia, which I'm really big on nowadays. So that being said, I guess we talked about that as well. I guess we sort of covered that as far as songs that you slept on now that you appreciate more now, and I think we've all kind of gotten those around from those. And to me, any lowlights here that you guys, you kind of, I think we kind of go around. But Dave, any lowlights?
The first quarter of the album.
First quarter of the album. I would have to agree with you there.
I thought it went really slow, and I was like, through the first 4 tracks, I'm not really finding anything that I'm vibing off. And I'm like, okay, why is this considered a classic? Because normally when you think of classic music, you think it's strong all the way through.
Well, we also got to remember that a lot of times back then, they wouldn't give you a real album, the classic. They would give your next album the classic.
Yeah,
like Hello Earth, they didn't consider Hell on Earth the classic. Until later on. Right? Yeah. But they'll give your next album the classic. They give you the 5 mics on the next album. They should have gave you the 5 before.
But what I'm saying is basically I'm listening to the whole thing. I'm like, man, I'm going to sit down. I'm listening to this thing all the way through without stopping. And I'm taking notes. And I'm like, okay, first song, nah. Second, man. Third, man. Fourth, man. And I wrote down and said, this is not my type. This isn't my cup of tea right now. This something has changed. And then Let It Ho Be Ho came on. I'm like, okay. And then it started to rise. And then we got to Where You From. It's like, oh, okay. Then Big Noise came on, and then USA, and then The Realest came on. The Realest came on. I'm like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And then it finished strong with the Quiet Storm remix, which is, like I said, arguably one of Mobb's biggest tracks ever.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's where I am. It just, the Lowlights, just the first 4 or 5 songs, it just started off really slow for me.
Yeah. Now, Dom, I know that you mentioned earlier about Adrenaline, that you said you figured that was a drop-off in the album. I think it was a drop-off, too, I do. To me, I think, like I said, the first half of the album was really slow to me. And I think you got to really look into the bootlegging thing. It really ruined a few albums actually in those late 90s, man, when the albums got bootlegged and things were getting leaked, and it cost labels a lot of money to be able to do things like that now, So
Adrenaline probably was just a throw-in.
Yeah.
Like,
it was.
They probably wasn't going to pick off at first. It was like,
let's throw this in there. Put that like in the middle of the album, track 8 somewhere.
It's a filler.
Album songs. Like we say album, they're like hits. There are hits, singles, hits, and album songs. And that to me is a bona fide album song.
Album track.
When we start talking about the type of songs that you have on an album.
Filler.
So now that we get that, this
exactly
is album filler. So now that we get to that point, let's talk about the ultimate test. So how has this aged over the last 20 years? I guess we'll start. And of course, we'll put these in categories. Is it a bona fide classic? Is it a borderline classic? Or is it just classic in its time? That's the real thing. We talk about albums we're going to review here on The Vault. Is it a bona fide classic? Is it a borderline classic? Or is it just classic in its time?
I got to say, like I said, I didn't listen to it back then. And the way that the album started off, the first quarter of the album didn't really rock with me. But as it grew, it caught my attention. I would say borderline classic.
Borderline classic.
I would say borderline. I'm not, like I said, I didn't listen to it back then, so I didn't really think it was, I didn't even know about it. And I know damn well it's not 5-star Illmatic type classic. I mean, it's borderline.
Well, you know what's crazy? This is actually, with the Source review, this in 99, it got 4.5 mics.
A little too generous to me.
4.5 mics, and when they go back and re-reviewed, because after a certain period of time, there were certain albums that received 4.5. Well, they did 3 things. One, albums that were never reviewed, they actually reviewed them and re-rated them. They had albums that originally received 4.5 mics that received 5 mics later that should have gotten 5 mics, and then the ones that were rated 4 mics, they ended up giving them the ones that should have gotten 5 mics ended up getting 5 mics, and this was not one of them. this stayed just at 4.5 mics. So it's interesting though. At that time, how that stayed at 4.5, and it was at 4.5, and it stayed at 4.5.
Right.
Damo, what's your verdict? Is it bona fide classic, borderline classic, or just classic in its time?
Classic at its time.
Classics in its time.
Yeah.
And why do you say that?
Just when you go back and listen to it, back then, I think the nostalgia was so, for me being a fan of theirs.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, this on a classic.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't Hell on Earth classic.
Yeah.
But I was like, oh yeah, this on a. But then when you go back and listen to it now, and you hear them first 7 songs, it don't transfer from Hell on Earth to there to where it could be a bona fide classic.
Yeah. To me, I would have to say, if the original Murda Muzik would have came out, this would have been a bona fide classic. But because of certain things happening, the way that this album sort of started slow to me, and it picked up, definitely. If it was just the second half of this album, I think this would be a bona fide classic. Yeah. But I think, to me, I'm going to have to say it's probably classic for its time and sort of straddling into the borderline classic at this time, only because that first half of the album, to me, started way too slow. Yeah. I thought it could have maintained a lot faster. Now, as far as how it stacks up with their other albums, knowing what their other albums as you've listened, and to me, I think my whole ranking Mobb Deep and what they've done sort of stops after this album, because anything they put out after this, your career kind of gets damaged a little bit. You know, you survived the Tupac beef, obviously.
Yeah.
but I think P's credibility took a large hit after Summer Jam when Jay put a picture of him, you know. And so, you know, you're still a great rapper, man, obviously, no doubt. But I think, to me, how this stacks up with the rest of the other albums, personally, I'll have to say, for me, this is number 3. It's a distant third to me behind Infamous and Hell on Earth. It's not a bad thing, though, because when you think about those 2 albums, it's kind of hard to be able to stack up an album to be that close to when you put out something that great. And to me, in those 2 albums, like here, they have some skippable material in Murda Muzik.
Yeah.
I don't think they have any. There's not much skippable material in either one, Infamous or Hell on Earth. No. And so, Damo, what do you say? In the other albums, how does it stack up to you as well?
You forgetting about, you didn't like Infamy?
I wasn't really a big fan. I wasn't a huge fan.
It's before Infamy, so
yeah,
I would put it third.
Yeah. Dave?
Again. I wasn't really a Mob guy.
Yeah.
So I have.
But you've heard Infamous, and you've heard Infamous.
I've heard Infamous.
Yeah, and you've heard Infamous and Hell on Earth, or at least some of Hell on Earth.
Some of.
Yeah.
I would probably say the same.
Third.
Yeah. Place. Third place ain't bad.
Yeah, it's not bad. I mean, and considering the quality of which we're pulling from, and again, nobody really knew Juvenile Hell, which actually, you know, listening to it now, and I actually took a listen to Juvenile Hell not that long ago, considering how young they were and them just getting started out. They had some beats produced by Large Professor, by DJ Premier. So it's okay for a debut album. It's just not, there's a big transition, though, from Juvenile Hell into Infamous. Like, they took a big step forward. You know, some people have that sophomore slump. They actually made that big jump in between the freshman album and the sophomore album. So it is, to me, I think, their third best. But that's Murda Muzik. Of course, came out 20 years ago, almost, one day removed. Here we are in 2019. It came out August 17th, 1999. The one thing I will have to say about the lasting impact of this album, the legacy for this album is definitely in the single, It's Quiet Storm, because it's still now just the biggest hit now as it was 20 years ago. Yes. Mm-hmm. The beat is such a classic that there were so many people that did remixes on that beat alone. There's at least two different songs that I know that I've heard with this beat that have fired just as much as Quiet Storm is itself. And then to me, obviously, without a shadow of a doubt, if it's not Kim's best verse, it's definitely in her top 5.
Yeah.
You know, if it's not her best verse, it's definitely in her top 5.
Most memorable.
Hey,
you know,
Kim versus catch you got to catch yourself when you say something that you don't supposed to be saying.
Exactly. Right. So yeah, man, that's where I'm at with this album. And to me, like I said, it's between borderline and classic in its time. And you know, the sad thing about this more than anything else is that we will not get another Mobb Deep album. P passing away, and I think that's the sad thing about it. But the good thing is that we have classic Mobb Deep material that we can always remember and always listen to. we knew this was a springboard for Prodigy getting HNIC out there, which I'm pretty sure we're going to end up reviewing next year when that 20-year anniversary comes out, because there were a few gems on that album there as well. But to me, this was the beginning, or like when Mobb Deep was at their apex. If their apex was right around, I'm going to say right between 95 and 2000. This is right there and within its apex. But there we go. Of course, Mobb Deep Murda Muzik. You can listen to it wherever you need to listen to it. There is our review of it. Of course, I want to thank my co-host for sitting in here with me reviewing this. Gentlemen, it's been fun. We are going to get our next review in, and we want to make sure that you guys stay tuned. Make sure that you're subscribing to the Vault Podcast anywhere that you can get podcasts and download them as well. Of course, you can follow me. I am at It's Lesson on Instagram and then also on Twitter. And you can also follow IV Creative at IVECRE, the number 8. And that's on Instagram. And Dave, if you want to go ahead and get your social media stuff out there, go ahead.
Oh, you can follow me at DETSR617 and DET82pod on IG. You can follow me on Twitter. I am more active on Twitter these days at DETSR617. And you can also follow us at the Connection Media page as well, also on Facebook.
Absolutely, no doubt. You got any plugs you want to put out there? Not necessarily social media, but anything. Nah. Yeah.
Yeah. You got. I forgot. So yeah, we got season 2 of 2-on-1 coming up in September. So I'm looking forward to that. Shout out to Yo and Mika. Can't wait to get back on the mic with them 2 ladies. Wonderful people.
No doubt. And with that, we are going to sign off. Again, you are listening to the Vault Podcast, Classic Music Reviews. Make sure that you keep listening, ladies and gentlemen. And always make sure you keep your headphones on and your music loud, but not too loud to disturb others around you. Always peace, love, and happiness. And make sure that we take care of each other, love one another, and always trust in our beliefs. Thank you.
Thank you for listening and coming into The Vault. Please subscribe and follow us on Facebook at IV Creative and Instagram at IVECRE8.